get into it.
Let's go.
Dansby Swanson.
Let's start with Dansby. I did this right up here. The way that I kind of looked at it was this guy had a breakout of all breakout campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
His career high in F4, which he set last year, was 3.4. I think he put up a 6.4 this year. So he was 3 wins better than his career year. You talk about contract years. Aaron Judge had probably the best contract year of all time. Carlos Correa last year probably had the second best contract year of all time. And now look at Dansby Swanson, who had a damn good contract year and one of the better contract years we've seen in recent memory. The way I view it for him is there are 2 different types of negotiations that'll happen between he and his reps at Excel Sport Management and Major League Baseball teams. Dansby Swanson, Excel, and the Braves are going to have a different conversation than Dansby and Excel and the rest of Major League Baseball. He is an Atlanta boy. He's from Kennesaw. He went to high school in Marietta, Georgia. He got traded to the Braves. He spent his entire year with the Atlanta Braves. He won a World Series with his hometown team. You know that he's not going to demand the money that he would demand from everybody else from his hometown team that has become his permanent home. So how does that change the contract structure? And we'll get a little bit deeper into that. What were your main takeaways from reading this?
It's a good question. My main takeaways from the Dansby article was how high floor that he is. That's why when I'm looking at this free agent shortstop crop, I'm very comfortable giving Dansby Swanson a long-term deal because, we talk about how this was Dansby's coming out year, right? And, it was on me kind of because I gave Dansby going into this year kind of the average shortstop barometer, which is not an indictment on Dansby Swanson. It's more of a testament to the overall position, that how loaded it is, that a guy like Dansby Swanson, who in the past may have a 750 OPS, maybe he's like a 108 OPS plus guy over his last couple of seasons, that he would be a guy who you'd want to invest in. But really, what I found from Dansby, like in 2020, for example, he finished 18th in MVP voting. I know it was a shortened season, but he was still a very solid player. And not only is Dansby so high floor because we know about the defense, but because he has missed 2 games in the last 3 years. And yes, that includes a 2020 shortened season, but 162 and 160 games. So Dansby is a guy, especially at 28 years old, and it's also the intangibles of Dansby Swanson, right? Seems like such a leader. And he finally found it. He was a number 1 overall pick out of Vanderbilt for a reason. And now the bat is finally starting to come into play. So the biggest takeaway I got is, of all the shortstops, maybe I'm not the most comfortable because he's being compared to Trey Turner and Carlos Correa. But when I compare him to Xander Bogaerts, I would rather give him the money, even though Bogaerts has proved it year over year over year.
So the way I went into the contract projection was trying to find precedent. And you kind of see it with Javier Baez and Trevor Story, who signed identical years, 6 years, $140 million. Story with the Red Sox, Baez with the Tigers. But I thought Dansby should get paid more than that. He's better than Baez and Story. And I know hindsight 2020, like those guys both kind of stunk it up in 2022. But even then, I feel better about the incredibly high floor of Dansby Swanson, like you're saying, and the intangibles that just ooze out of his ass, as opposed to the boom or bust nature of Trevor Story and Javier Baez. So I then looked to second base. And the 2 precedents that I found were Jose Altuve, who signed 7 years, $163 million. But granted, Altuve was already a superstar at this time. And Marcus Semien. Semien was the one that I really settled on. Semien signed it when he was 30 years old, so 2 years older than Dansby will sign his contract at. But Semien was coming off of a year in which he hit 45 bombs and finished 3rd in AL MVP voting. So you got to knock it down a little bit. But here's what I'll say. Marcus Semien plays second base. Is he a Gold Glover at second base? Yes. But this was that pop-up year for Semien where he came out of nowhere and was incredible. Sounds a lot like Dansby, right? Pop-up year. Came out of nowhere. It was incredible. He was always good. Like Semien was always a
He
good
did have that
hitter.
2019 year where he also went nuclear.
Yeah, but then he dipped in
Exactly.
2020. That's the thing. So like it was tough for Marcus Semien to see that number and say, yeah, totally worth it. Dansby Swanson is going to be a really good defensive shortstop and a leader for the next 6 years, 7 years. So the way I looked at it is, if you're a team not named the Atlanta Braves, Dansby Swanson can put 7 years, 175 in front of you and say, match that or we're done talking. I believe that.
No, I believe in that too. And just speaking about the intangibles, because we know about his leadership, we know about his influence in the locker room. We know that, he's becoming like the captain on a Braves team that is a perennial World Series favorite. And I think that will be pretty impactful in contract negotiations. But when we're talking about intangibles, like there are players who not settle with their talent, but I'm sure there are players in the big leagues that, have all this pop and are really quick, and they think to themselves, well, I don't need to improve that much. But that just wasn't Dansby Swanson. I was looking at defensive highlights with Colby. We were looking at some film because we were thinking to ourselves, like, how did he become so freaking good at shortstop? And if you look at some of the stats, right, some of the advanced stats, and obviously those don't tell the full story, but you can see like massive improvements on some sides. Like, for example, Dansby Swanson coming in on the ball, like a little nubber hit. He wasn't as quick getting to that ball. This year, he was unbelievable when it comes to the numbers. The backhand wasn't as good. The arm wasn't as good, but everything improved. And you know that Dansby Swanson took a look at that and he thought, well, I'm having a solid season. He could have just said, you know what, I'm just going to keep working on my overall craft. But he fixed individual things that weren't going right for him. And I think that speaks to the level of baseball player. Even if he goes on short little slumps, or he's going to put in the work day in, day out to improve on his shortcomings to make him one of the most well-rounded shortstops in the game. And he did it. And it came in droves this year. Like, will he ever have a 6.4 F4 season? I wouldn't put it past him. But even if he doesn't, like, let's say you take the middle ground of some of those 3-4 win seasons and compare it to the 6. Like, if he's a 4.5, 5 WAR player, he is well worth the money when you consider the off-field intangibles.
I believe he's a 5-win player for the next 3 years and then a 4-win player for the 3 years after.
I mean, that's a $40 million guy. If it's one WAR or if 1.0 F4 is worth $8 million, that's a $40 million player. Now, is he going to get $40 million? No. But does he deserve an absolute bag? Absolutely.
Yes. So here were the landing spots that I threw out. Atlanta, we don't need to get into that. Like Dansby Swanson is the shortstop for the Atlanta Braves.
I agree. I want you to talk about the hometown thing too, because it's something I didn't know.
So the way that I kind of broke it down in here was Alex Anthopoulos. Like, when we talk about the Atlanta Braves, it is always pre-arbitration, long-term, mutually beneficial deals. Like, hey, maybe a guy is underpaid, but maybe they're overpaid by the end of it, right? Like, there's a 50-50 chance that we're saying Michael Harris was drastically overpaid by the end of this deal, but there's also a 50-50 chance that Michael Harris cheated himself out of $50 million by the end of this deal. But you know what? That's a bet that these guys are willing to take on themselves, because Michael Harris still has over $100 million guaranteed to him pretty much. And he's locked up and he likes this place. He's going to do it. Same with Austin Riley. Same with Spencer Strider. They constantly do this. We saw Acuna and Albies as the first mover here. The only exception to that was the Matt Olson trade this past offseason, when they were having conversations with Freddie Freeman. And everybody was saying, I remember you saying it verbatim, there's no shot Freddie isn't an Atlanta Brave next year after they won the World Series.
Absolutely said. I said there was no fucking way he's leaving.
But because of all the murmurs, right? The murmurs kept on going. And then all of a sudden, bam, Alex Anthopoulos trades for Matt Olson.
Mm-hmm.
Then you know Freddie, the Freddie thing is over. He's going to go somewhere else. Matt Olson, really good somewhere else. But guess what? AA knew that he could get him on this hometown discount, signed him to 8 years, 168, because he's from Atlanta. He was committed to Vandy. He wanted to stay close. He's coming home. So I think Dansby has much of the same thought as Matt Olson, where, hey, I could go get the same AAV as Freddie Freeman's going to get in free agency when my time is up. Olson, I think, got $2 million, but across 2 more years. So the AAV is down like $6 million a year or something like that. So I think Matt Olson knew that he could get more money, but it's kind of awesome to be the first baseman for your hometown team. I think it's kind of awesome for Dansby Swanson to be the shortstop of his hometown team for his entire career.
That's something I didn't know about Dansby. I didn't know he was, a Georgia native. Obviously, I knew the Vandy stuff, and I know that's close, but I didn't realize that he's kind of grown up here. And who knows I don't know. Maybe he is, and some listeners of the Just Baseball Show can clear it up, or maybe you can. If he was a Braves fan growing up. So I'm sure, like, when they have those conversations, if he gets the same offer or even a little bit more, because at the same time too, like, this was part of Freddie Freeman's, when he realized that, in LA, you got to pay some taxes. Like, there are some taxes involved with some of these deals. Like, if you sign with New York or you sign in California, you got to pay a lot in tax, and in Atlanta, not as much. So it's hard to see him outside of a Braves uniform. And I think the only way he doesn't is if he either gets absolutely blown out of the water by another team. That's it.
That's it.
I don't know how else. I was going to maybe give you another one, but
no, if somebody said, we'll give you $200 million, he says yes to that. Aside from that, I'm not sure what he says yes to.
I think it would have to be more. I mean, think about it. If you get, we'll see. I mean, that could be a lot more than he gets, but you wrote the article. Let's talk about some of the suitors before we give like a contract prediction.
Yeah, Baltimore. I think he fits in really well in Baltimore.
Yeah, and Baltimore fans, or maybe fans of other teams, are thinking to themselves when they hear the Orioles, like, wait, what do you mean? Gunnar Henderson is playing shortstop. Well, Gunnar Henderson can move over to third base, and then you also think to yourself, well, what about Jorge Mateo? But you wrote it beautifully in the article. He maybe could be more well used by the Orioles if he kind of plays a Swiss Army knife, right?
Best utility guy in baseball, Mateo.
Exactly.
He's a freak athlete.
But again, he was a Gold Glove Award winner, or at least he should have been at shortstop.
If you can get Dansby fucking Swanson to be your everyday shortstop, you're going to go get Dansby.
And he actually won a Gold Glove too. Well, yeah, regardless of whether it was deserved. Yeah, you're not dropping off there. And I think he fits great on the Orioles too, because they are such a young team. And not only has Dansby been kind of a captain-esque on a very young team like the Braves were, but he could go into Baltimore and kind of give that championship pedigree, a player that they would need. And Mike Elias, I mean, you wrote it yourself. He's gonna expand the payroll, and that could be for Dansby Swanson.
Said, quote, he wants to significantly escalate the payroll. Next one is the Angels. I really like that fit because of the lack of durability on this team. They have the most durable guy in baseball in Shohei Ohtani, but
which is crazy to say. Isn't that crazy? But, like, he's just amazing.
He's incredible. He's an alien life form, but he is a DH that pitches every 5th day. But you've got Mike Trout, who we know has dealt with injury things. Anthony Rendon, who can't stay on the field to save his life. How much money would the Angels throw at Dansby Swanson to play 162 games in a given season?
And they need a shortstop too. But, like, are you kidding me? I mean, they do have Zach Neto coming up, who could be that guy there.
But he's going to start in Double-A. Like, he's not ready next year.
I know, but, like, they have to get pitching, Jack.
You got one more
hitters. If Dansby goes to the Angels, if he goes anywhere else, he's going to be great. If he goes to the Angels, he's getting hurt. Like, unfortunately. Like, damn it. But the Angels next year are going to be so good.
Ohtani, great. And Trout. Best team in baseball.
Fuck.
The Dodgers are the next one. Like, they're always going to be in on a big fish. And if they don't go after Turner or Correa, like, they're going to go after Xander and Dansby.
Yeah, and Freddie is, I know Freddie was at the beginning maybe considering, did I make the right move? He seemed to be very happy in LA. I know that if the Dodgers have an offer on the table, Dansby's going to give Freddie a call and be like, how do you like it there? And it's hard to think that Freddie gives him anything but rave reviews. I think the Dodgers, although shouldn't be a sleeper, kind of are, but definitely should be one of the front runners.
Yeah, and then the last one is San Francisco. And San Francisco is in a position to spend. They've got Brandon Crawford on the books for one more year,
Hmm.
but you don't want to miss out on this shortstop crop if you genuinely feel like you need a shortstop. And I think they might be pressing to find that heir to the Brandon Crawford throne.
I agree. And Dansby Swanson even kind of looks like Brandon Crawford. I don't know if
Yeah,
Giants fans will even
flowing
be
hair
able
in
to
the
tell the
beard.
difference. But yeah, the Giants have said that they are in on Aaron Judge. So that means they have money to spend. And with a lot of expiring contracts coming off the books, like Jock Peterson and potentially Carlos Rodon and a couple of others, they have the money to do so. Like I expect the Giants to be major players in this market, and Dansby Swanson could be that guy for me. He feels like he could be a Giant.
But I've got Dansby going back to Atlanta, 7 years, 158. I said I was enticed to give him an identical deal to Matt Olson, 8 years, 168, because shortstop is a more premium position than first base. But Olson was 3 years younger than Swanson at time of signing. So I'm going to knock it back $10 million, knock it back a year. This takes him through his age 35 season. Shit, man. I'll take 7 for 158 for my hometown team.
I think it's a great deal, and I think you're right on track there. And people may be wondering, well, if he is this good, why is he only making 7 years for 158? Even though 7 years for 158 is a lot. We said it in the pre-record in our 3 minutes of talking. He just hasn't done it enough, and it's not that he's been bad before this. It's just he's never put up a 6.4 F4 season besides last year. I'm sure teams are going to go into the negotiating room being like, we love Dansby and he deserves the world, but there is always that crutch that these teams can lean on saying, you've only done it really once. I mean, you've had good years, not one of the best shortstop in baseball type years. So I think you're pretty on the money. Personally, I'd give him more money. I think he deserves more money. But to your point, I think that's pretty on par. And I think the Braves, like, what? I was dead wrong about Freddie leaving Atlanta, and I'm ready to be dead wrong again about Dansby.